So, cautious optimism around the fate of the hostages in the short term, but what about long-term solutions for the conflict? Hannah Weisfeld is Executive Director and founder of Yachad, a British-Jewish organisation which supports a political resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Hannah, hello, welcome to the programme.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. I mean, you tell me, how far away do you feel we are now from any level of solution to this conflict?
Well, I mean, right now it feels almost laughable to talk about the idea that this conflict would be solved, and the kind of the wisdom has always been that it would be in the form of two states for two people. And in recent years, we have gone so far away from that formula that it's almost been a thing that you can't even talk about, because people say that you're living in a kind of alternative reality if you think that is possible, and that you don't understand what's going on the ground. I think what this conflict has done is brought that back to the fore. So there is now an understanding that there is no other solution for the people of Israel and the Palestinian people, that in order to live in freedom and dignity, two things need to happen. Firstly, Israel needs to have secure borders, and I think October the 7th has proved that it does not have secure borders. And the Palestinian people need to live in freedom, dignity, and in independence. And they have nothing like that now. And, you know, the events since October the 7th have proved the exact opposite, that we have two groups of people that are living in the situation they're in, with political leaderships that have no desire to uphold those two sides of the equation. And until that changes, there will be no future in which either the Israeli or the Palestinian people have the peace and the security that they need. So in terms of the long term, what we really need to see now is, alongside international efforts to de-escalate what is happening right now, and you know, the fact that we have now been talking for nearly 24 hours about the possibility of a pause in the fighting and a hostage deal, and it hasn't happened, you know, while meanwhile there are 240 hostages under the ground and millions of Gazans that are on the brink of a salvation. That cannot happen soon enough. But the other side of that equation is the long-term political action that needs to happen right now to finally bring this conflict to an end. Because without a resolution, and ultimately it can only be solved through a diplomatic and a political resolution, and not a military one, we are going to have this conversation again, because the violence will continue.
Yeah, well, look, it's not something we're going to solve in a 5-minute conversation, is it? But there have been a lot of diplomatic noises since the conflict began about, it's never darker than it is before the dawn, and people are saying this could be the nadir now, and that good will come out of it. I mean, I've heard a lot of Western diplomats saying that, but you've identified there, Hannah, one of the problems right at the heart of all this is that there are vested interests on both sides to not end in this conflict. So how on earth do you either persuade them otherwise or silence them?
Well, I think that we have to remember that what existed on October the 6th, which was a status quo that had been like that for 20 years nearly, of political stagnation in the international community. We're not going back to that. This is going to be completely transformative politically inside Israel. So Benjamin Netanyahu, who has basically ruled, with the exception of 1 year, Israel for 13 years now, will not survive as the Prime Minister. He may survive the war, but he will not remain the Prime Minister of Israel. And whatever happens to Hamas, they will not exist in the same form that they did previously. So things will change, and we have to take that as an opportunity to move this conflict forward in a different way. So there are really practical things that the international community can start to do around settlements and settler violence in the West Bank, around securing Israel's borders, around reforming the Palestinian Authority so it can govern properly. And those things need to happen simultaneously alongside whatever now happens in the kind of intricacies of the negotiations to reduce and de-escalate the tensions that are kind of happening right now in Gaza.
But even if your dearest wish comes true, and somehow a Palestinian nation not ruled by Hamas wants to live in harmony alongside Israel, you've mentioned them there, the settlers. You've got this issue within Israel, which that will not be resolved easily, will it?
No, but that has to be resolved as part of a political agreement. So the status quo which we've had now for 20 years, in which those two parties continue to operate within their political entities, doing basically whatever they want with no regard for the other entity, that cannot continue. So what we've seen is, an Israeli government lurched further and further to the right over the last 12, 13 years. It will not be able to continue to do that. And the international community will have to prevent the settler violence, which is now out of control in the West Bank. It will have to stop that from happening. It will have to pressurize the Israeli government to reduce that and to actually remove that threat. And likewise, the international community will have to help the PA to reform so it can govern both the West Bank and most likely Gaza too.
What's your assessment of attitudes of civilians? Because looking from the outside, everything that happened on October the 7th, one would imagine hardened the attitudes of Israelis towards Palestinian incursions into their territory, and likewise everything that's happened in Gaza since October the 7th, you would imagine as all it's done is turn a whole new generation against Israel. So while anyone civilized likes to think popular opinion may turn towards peace, actually a lot of attitudes may be hardened and enmities reinforced by what we've seen.
Yeah, look, I think that's inevitable. That in the aftermath of this bloody war, that there is, that we are, that this is a generational setback in terms of, of public opinion, and that there's no shadow of a doubt that the extreme level of violence that people have witnessed and experienced is going to harden people's hearts. That said, I think there is something significant taking place, and I'm kind of more in tune with the polling that's happening inside Israel, and one can only assume that there is absolutely no way right now of gaining any kind of sense of the kind of public opinion inside Gaza, given the scale of devastation. But inside Israel, there is some really interesting polling, which shows that I think the figure is 52% of Israelis agree that the only way to resolve this long term is through some kind of political agreement. So there are some narratives that have been shattered by this experience. So the narrative inside Israel, which is that we can maintain this situation and the status quo through conflict management, that narrative is gone. No longer do the people of Israel believe that we can continue to manage this conflict, which means that there are different ways and different choices in how you can solve it. But there is an understanding in the public inside Israel that you can't manage it anymore, which is the way in which we've been dealing with this conflict now for so long. Well,
it's fascinating, and it will be to see how things work their way through. Hannah, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hannah Weisfeld there, founder and executive director of Yachad, which, as I said, is a British Jewish organisation which supports a political resolution to the conflict in the Middle East. It is 6:25.